We have seen this team grow up. We have seen this team mature in front of us. We have labeled them at times, the greatest generation that we have seen in terms of talent and in terms of depth. I do think that there is a danger of looking at this group and letting them get away with not living up to expectations. Hello, Sunshine. I'm Alexi, Lalas, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This show, we'll be talking UCL final, a simple favor, German vacation, coaching carousel, CCC final, Messi's return, the U.S. men's national team roster, Hunger Games, the Olympic roster, Emma's arrival, face tats, soccer ownership, and so much more. But first, joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how are you doing on this Wednesday, May 29th in the year 2024?
I'm doing well. You do have to call me David Cox today.
Why is that?
Because that's who Sean Sullivan sent the rundown to. I texted him today. I said, aren't you going to send the rundown for the show? And he realized that he had accidentally sent it to somebody called David Cox. So somewhere at Fox, there's a guy named David Cox who yesterday received a email from Sean Sullivan with a rundown for a soccer podcast with Alexi Lalas.
Wow. Well, listen, to be fair, the last couple of weeks have been a little crazy. We've been all over the map, back and forth. You and I have both been on the road. We've done shows from here. We've done shows from there. We've done banked shows and all that kind of stuff. But we are back in the saddle, my friend. We are back in the studios here in L.A. as we gear up for this summer of soccer. And it is upon us. I did, as many people know, spend the last couple of weeks over there in Germany. I will talk about that at the end of the show because there's a lot to talk about over there. But obviously, the hosts are getting ready for the Euros, and they are ready. And it's a phenomenal country, and I had a wonderful time. Have you watched anything, my friend?
I have 3 things.
Oh, wow. Okay. A plethora.
Yeah, I don't read a lot of sports books, but I read one recently that I do want to recommend. It's called The New York Game by Kevin Baker.
Okay.
It's about the growth of baseball in New York from the Civil War until World War II and how it intertwined with the growth of New York City. Fascinating book. I loved it. It's got a chapter on the whole Wally Pibb Lou Gehrig situation, so got to read about that. So I highly recommend that book, The New York Game, Kevin Baker. On the television front, I did watch Ripley on Netflix, and I liked it more than you did. I actually liked it a lot. I thought it was an interesting
take.
From
an artistic bent?
Yeah.
You thought it was really cool and
thought it was visually stunning, the black and white,
Mm-hmm.
well acted. I liked the pacing of it. I actually went back and watched the movie as well, so I've had that whole Ripley story on the brain.
And how did you find the movie? Matt Damon?
Oh, the movie was great, but I do prefer the TV show, I must say.
Because you're a romantic and an artist and a creative sort, right? And so you just liked the long, drawn-out scenes and all that BS, right?
Yes. Yeah. Lastly, we're about to cover Euros this summer at Fox. I did this past weekend watched a documentary on Netflix about the chaos surrounding the last Euro final at Wembley, all that crowd trouble ahead of the England-Italy game. So,
and?
Disturbing stuff for sure.
Yeah. Do you think that it is dealt with, or that this is just an unfortunate byproduct of the passions and the ulterior motives at times, and lack of security and lack of organization?
Well, in the documentary, they attribute some of it to pent-up frustration from coming out of COVID and having been stuck in your homes for so long. So
that's a cop-out, though. That is a cop-out.
I agree.
Just because we went through a historic epidemic, and that doesn't give reason. I
agree, and we do have a big UEFA Champions League final at Wembley this weekend that we're going to talk about. So I also had that in the brain as I watched this documentary.
All right. Well, I watched a lot of stuff. I cannot for the life of me remember a lot of it. And being on airplanes over the last couple of weeks and many flights, transatlantic flights, and 7 hours at a time, I've watched a lot of different stuff. And like I said, I can't remember anything that I watched that really stuck with me. Although there was a point when I was somewhere over the Atlantic and I said, I want to watch something. And we had talked about The Matrix and these series and these multiple things. And I started to watch the Hunger Games because I think there's like 4 Hunger Games movies. And you remember this was a phenomenon when the Hunger Games movies came out. And it was based off the book, and a lot of people had read the book. So I tried to, because I had never seen them before, not because I was, putting my nose up at, I just didn't want to do it and never got around to it. So I started watching the Hunger Games. Jennifer Lawrence, I think, is one of the stars. There's a lot of stars in it. I don't get it. It did not take. And I watched one, and then I started to watch another one, and it just never really went anywhere. I did watch over there on the Netflix machine a movie called A Simple Favor with Anna Kendrick and Blake Lively. Now, this came and went. I did not see it because it came out in 2018, and it's just kind of reappeared over there on Netflix. And it is a really kind of interesting, I guess it's a crime drama, but there's a weird quirkiness about it in the way that it's acted and the way that it's told. And I don't know yet whether I like it or not. Blake Lively, by the way, boy, she's a beautiful, beautiful woman. I'd never really watched or seen a whole lot with her. And she's very, very good in this. And I do recommend it. But there's, like I said, there's a strange quirkiness that I'm not quite sure that I dig or not. All right, listen, we've been away from each other and apart from each other in terms of being in the same room for a long time now. Are you ready to light this candle again, my friend?
Let's do it.
Where shall we start? So much has happened.
I mentioned the UEFA Champions League final. On Saturday, it'll be Borussia Dortmund against Real Madrid at Wembley Stadium. Dortmund taking part in their third final, looking to lift the trophy for the second time. Real Madrid taking part in their 18th European Cup final and hoping to lift the trophy for the 15th time. They are the overwhelming favorites, but we'll see if Dortmund can spring a surprise. What say you?
I mean, look, so having been over in Germany the last couple of weeks and listening to what has happened, I will say this, because we're about to talk also about the Europa League final, but the reverence and the talk and the narratives out there are so much more about what Leverkusen has done as opposed to what Dortmund is doing and has done. And I think it's just because of the unexpected nature and the consistency when it comes to Leverkusen. The Dortmund part of it, I mean, look, they're underdogs, except they're in the final. So obviously they have found a way to get to this place that a lot of people didn't pick them to be. And they have plenty of talent. And even in previous matchups where we've said Dortmund's the underdog, they have risen to the occasion, and not just smash and grab types of things, but they have found ways to win. They have, this is a one-off type of thing. So I still, if I had to put my money on it, and all of my money, I would put it on Real Madrid. And I think any sane person would do that. If I have to put your money, Mosse, I'm putting it on Dortmund to continue along this Cinderella type of path, as much as a Dortmund can be a Cinderella.
Yeah, I mentioned it's their third final. In 97, they beat Juve 3-1 in Munich. And then in 2013, in a match that we covered at Fox, Gus Johnson on the call, they lost 2-1 to Bayern Munich at Wembley. Dortmund's attack that day was led by Robert Lewandowski and Marco Reus. That was the culmination of his first season at Dortmund. And now this final will be his last match at Dortmund before he perhaps heads to MLS. That's been a big rumor. But yeah, so a lot of people want to see Marco Reus go out a winner. There's also a legendary German on the other side, and Toni Kroos, who announced that he's retiring after the Euros. So this is his final match for Real Madrid. He's looking to go out a winner as well.
Well, you talk about reverence, because that news broke while I was in Germany. And, even for a guy that has made his way and really established himself from a club perspective outside of Germany, there's a recognition that this guy is very special, and still work to be done this summer as we continue on here. But a lot of the talk was that. I will say this, though, and as I said, I'm going to talk more about my trip there, but just as it relates to soccer, the fanatic of soccer and the fanaticism of soccer that often is portrayed when it comes to the Bundesliga and when it comes to German soccer, I didn't see or feel that. And again, I didn't feel that it wasn't a soccer nation, or that it wasn't preparing for this summer and to host the Euros. But it wasn't as in your face around every corner as I thought it would be, and that was a little bit surprising. And that's not to take anything away from the passion and the history over there. But look, these are good times when it comes to club soccer over there in Germany, and potentially good times when it comes to their national team relative to this summer.
I mentioned Toni Kroos on the topic of the Real Madrid midfield. You also have Jude Bellingham facing his former team. He joined Real Madrid from Dortmund last summer. And, you know, Dortmund inserted a clause in the contract that if he were to win the Champions League with Real Madrid this season, they would get X amount of money. And it's actually more than the prize money for winning the final. So financially, at least, they would actually benefit more from losing this game.
They're going to be fine. Dortmund's going to be just fine. And, you know, for a team that, look, I know it's one of the elites when it comes to Bundesliga, but they are always this team that loses their players and puts them on to a next higher level. And for that type of team to actually be in the final, have beaten others that oftentimes they lose players to, that says a lot about how good they are.
Now, Real Madrid are hoping to win this final on Saturday and then announce Mbappe early next week. They want Mbappe to contest this Euros as a Real Madrid player. And then they're already looking ahead to the Ballon d'Or. They think the top three could all be Real Madrid players: Mbappe, Jude Bellingham, and Vinicius Jr. So the next few months here could be this sort of celebration of Real Madrid if it plays out the way they're hoping.
But I think that there's a legitimate argument that they are all worthy and that they are certainly worthy of being there in that top three. But I don't know, we'll see.
One brief aside, Barcelona won the Women's Champions League. They beat Lyon 2-0 in the final. Aitana Bonmatí and Alexia Putellas scored the goals. Their third title in the last 4 years. They've taken that mantle from Lyon as the dominant European club women's team in the world. I'm surprised with how competitive a club Real Madrid are that they've ceded that ground to Barcelona and have allowed Barcelona to be so much better than them on the women's side.
Yeah, I mean, it would come from the top and the leadership in terms of how much they actually see it as a legitimate business. And, you know, we've said this time and time again when it comes to women's soccer that it can't be looked at as a charity. And so if and when people see it as a business, and sometimes a long-term business, and oftentimes a long-term business, that you're not going to get it to change. Or if they ever feel shamed that they are not competing or that they are not investing and that they are losing, and certainly with the men's team, as we just talked about, doing so well, it's kind of hard. But it does bring up a point where we talk so much about the new investment and the rise of European soccer and the built-in type of infrastructure that some of these elite teams have. But it is very top-heavy. And in compare and contrast with NWSL and others, the parity that exists in NWSL does not exist around the world. Now, these teams at the top are very, very good, and they can get better. But in order for these leagues to grow, there has to be some parity, and there has to be others willing to step up and spend money.
Back to the men in the other European finals. Atalanta hammered Leverkusen 3-0 in the Europa League final. Ademola Lookman with a hat-trick that ended up being Leverkusen's only defeat in 53 matches in all competitions this season because they went on to beat Kaiserslautern in the German Cup final. That was all while you were there. You mentioned there was a lot of Leverkusen buzz, so what did you take away from it all?
Yeah, I mean, everybody was going crazy and getting excited. So we were there for for that game, the Leverkusen game, but also there for the Pokal final on the weekend. So there was plenty of big games that were happening, and you saw the fans. This is typical soccer gods. You shine on them the entire season, a miraculous and beautiful consistency throughout the season, and then in the biggest moment, look, man, and he did, and it was pretty impressive. It was just one of those days where it was not going to happen for Leverkusen. And one of those days where everything that they touched and everything Lookman touched certainly was gold.
On a recent pod, we were reminiscing about Parma's glory days. Atalanta was the first Italian team to win the UEFA Cup/Europa League since Parma in '99. I went back and looked at the lineup of that Parma team. Gigi Buffon in goal, Lilian Thuram, Fabio Cannavaro, Hernan Crespo. They brought Asprilla off the bench, Verón in the midfield. Those Parma teams in the '90s were scary.
It was nice, and it was just like I said, the stadium wasn't that great. It's kind of a small, mid-market type of town, but they figured out how to do it. And at Atalanta, their rise. Who's the Argentinian? There's Papu Gomez and others in terms of little engine that could doing big things. So congratulations to Atalanta. Another feather in the cap when it comes to Serie A and their kind of resurrection from some difficulties over the last decade. So congratulations to them, and for For Bayer Leverkusen, just the worst possible thing to happen at the worst possible moment.
And Serie A could win another European trophy. Fiorentina right now are tied 0-0 with Olympiacos in extra time in the Conference League final, so we'll keep you up to date on that. But yeah, what's
this?
Conference League final.
This is below the NIT.
Yeah, this is actually taking place in Athens, and I thought Kat was still there for her honeymoon, so I wondered if she might go to this game, but I ran into her just now before we started taping, so she's back from her honeymoon.
A lot of people going to Greece.
Yes.
And what's not to love? Great country.
But yeah, Serie A's performance in the Europa League and the Conference League this year is why they were the leaders in the coefficient and got that extra Champions League spot, because they were actually quite poor in the Champions League. They only got 2 teams in a knockout stage and got none beyond the round of 16, but they really flexed the depth in these 2 other competitions.
All right, where should we go now?
So, speaking of Serie A, that's where we'll lead off our coaching carousel chat. A lot of news there. We'll begin with Juventus, who won the Coppa Italia this past season, and they're going to finish either 3rd or 4th in Serie A. We still don't know yet because there's a makeup game between Atalanta and Fiorentina taking place this upcoming weekend, which will dictate that. But nevertheless, they parted ways with Max Allegri, and it looks like they're going to hire Thiago Motto, who did so well this season with Sean Sullivan's beloved Bologna. Sean is devastated by this news. Thiago Motto heading to Juve. We'll see what that means for Weston McKennie and Timmy Weah. We'll see if Weston McKennie is even on the team next season. We know that whole contract situation. Before we started taping, I know you were on the phone trying to glean some information about that. So, a lot going on.
Yeah. So, well, first off, I think Sean is torn in that his Bologna team, his adopted Bologna team, this is a feather in their cap. This is providing somebody a platform to go on to, I know it's not the nicest phrase, but bigger and better things. And so in that sense, Bologna and Sean Sullivan should be proud. But when you lose, and we just talked about Dortmund in the previous conversation, you got to be able to restock. And whether it's somebody at the head, easier said than done when you're losing Malta, or it's players that you are inevitably going to lose for bigger and greener pastures out there, you got to be able to replace them. Now, when these coaching changes happen, especially at teams where U.S. players are playing well, whether it's a Weston McKennie at Juventus or whether it's a Christian Pulisic at AC Milan. The question is this going to change the dynamic? And would a dynamic right now that for those 2 players that we mentioned is pretty good. And we've all been there as players, and we've all have seen it when a changing of the guard happens and somebody can come in and it's Janet Jackson, what have you done for me lately? And sometimes they just want to continue with what's worked. Sometimes they want their own people in there. Sometimes they just want to change to see change. Or sometimes you just don't fit with the way that they want to play, whether it's formation or whether it's ideas or ideology when it comes to how the play should happen. And so every player needs to be able to adapt and to adjust. Some players are able to do it. Other players aren't. Still no word when it comes to Weston McKennie. He has 1 year left on his contract. And if something bigger or better came along, I certainly think that he would look at it. But he is a coveted player, I think also from Juventus, but also from other teams out there. So I think I'm not worried about what Weston McKennie is going to do. But with a new coach coming in, there is always the question as to whether they want to move him on and whether he wants to start fresh without players.
Also, some news about his love life. He might have broken up with David Fratese's sister, although I know you were trying to find out about that. I'm not sure what the latest is.
Yeah. I don't know. It seems like he was in the last year of his contract with that.
Yeah.
And she was on the field when they won the Italian Cup and everything like that. So I hope that he's okay from a heart standpoint and an emotional standpoint coming in this summer, because are expecting big things from Weston and Company when it comes to Copa America. So, broken heart and all, I hope he is able to put it back together at least for the tournament.
Sean Sullivan, incidentally, had a lot of thoughts about Motto leaving, but he texted David Cox, so I don't know what there. But on that U.S. players with new coaches theme, AC Milan finished 2nd in Serie A, but they parted ways with Stefano Pioli, and they are set to hire Paulo Fonseca, a Portuguese manager who's coming over from Lille. We'll see what that means for Christian Pulisic and Yunus Musa.
That's like the Paulo Fonseca, that played, or is this this is Paulo Fonseca that played at Roma, I think.
He managed Roma.
Did he play at Roma too? Let's look it up, Mosse. Let's figure this out.
So why don't you vamp for...
Okay. Again, when it comes to Christian Pulisic may be maybe more so. He played at Porto? Oh, okay. All right, played at a bunch of different places. All right, listen. When it comes to Christian Pulisic right now, I think Christian Pulisic, more so than any American in Europe, is sitting pretty. He has had, I guess it's arguable, but I would certainly tab him as having the best season in Europe. And so I guess the leverage that he has, but again, a new coach comes in and looks at Christian Pulisic and says, it's not my kind of player. And you got to let coaches do what they want to do. But whether it's Paulo Fonseca or anybody else coming in, I would hope that they would see that they have quality, that now they have consistency, and that's always been a question when it comes to Christian Pulisic, and knock on wood, he continues to stay healthy. But, when he's healthy, man, oh man, that's a player that AC Milan or any other team around the world, I think, would want to have.
And then big news today on the coaching front. Barcelona officially announced former Bayern boss Hansi Flick, and then Bayern Munich officially announced Vincent Kompany. Let's do Barcelona first. The turn of events with Xavi was remarkable. He announced he was leaving in January. They tried to convince him to stay, and then announced to great fanfare that he was staying. And then a few weeks later, they fire him. And what happened there was, in a press conference ahead of a La Liga match against Almeria, Xavi spoke very pessimistically about next season, saying that given the financial situation, it's going to be tough to compete with Real Madrid domestically and the likes of Manchester City in Europe. And the club president, Laporta, did not like that, thought it was too defeatist, and so became very angry and fired him as a result. And now they're bringing Hansi Flick.
I love it. I love it, Mosse. I love it because it confirms and amplifies what Barcelona is, or what Barcelona has been, right? And there are power plays, but what do they say about Barcelona?
Més que un club.
Més que un club. Well, it's also més que un jugador, right? And this is a legend that we are talking about. And if anybody has been given the benefit of the doubt and leash, it would be Xavi, but he shut his mouth off, all right? And the way in which he went about his business was not something that obviously the people that matter, and the only people that matter, could take. And it would be one thing if you were kicking ass, but that's not necessarily the case. And if you're already coming in and being pessimistic and being publicly pessimistic about what's to come, that inspires nobody. And, I mean, Hansi Flick's a better manager. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. So you have upgraded. And I'm not saying that he can't continue on and get more experience and be better going forward. But right now, you have the opportunity to get Hansi Flick, and I think this is a good hire, and this could potentially get Barcelona back to where it needs to be.
Yeah, Hansi Flick guided Bayern Munich to a treble in 2020, which included beating Barcelona 8-2 in a Champions League quarterfinal match. And he had a very good relationship with Robert Lewandowski, who will be his center forward now. Right. So we'll see what happens with that. With Bayern Munich, Thomas Tuchel had announced he was leaving. Then there were reports that he might stay, but he didn't, in fact, end up leaving. Bayern missed out on some of their top choices, and they ended up hiring Vincent Kompany, who got relegated from the Premier League with Burnley this past season. So this was a bit of a head-scratcher. Nevertheless, Vincent Kompany gets the Bayern Munich job.
All right, so first off, we come to find out that there was positive vibes and positive words, both public and maybe behind the scenes, when it comes to Vincent Kompany's old coach, which would be Pep Guardiola. And so that tree of Guardiola continues. And look, you are the people that you associate, and when you're rubbing elbows and shoulders, and when you are connected to, and like I said, associated with greatness, which is what Pep Guardiola is, that is going to rub off, and you are going to be perceived as something more, having gone through that. And that applies not just to coaches, but that also applies to players, having been coached under Pep. And so Pep spreads his magic around, and it changes the way that we look. In a general sense, I don't have a problem with a coach who has failed with very little, okay, and failed in that he couldn't get them to stay up, right? That does not mean that coach can't be good, especially if given a much better car. And so while he wasn't able to win the race with a Trabant, all right, now he's being given a Ferrari. And while he may be the same driver it might be a very, very different outcome. So I get it. But this is also about who he is as a name and, like I said, who he is associated with.
That's where I was going to go next, because the other bit of news was Chelsea got rid of Mauricio Pochettino, which was actually mildly surprising because they had a good end to the season. So a lot of people thought they were going to stick with him, but they get rid of Pochettino and they've hired Enzo Maresca, who just won the championship with Leicester, but prior to that had a cup of coffee with City as an assistant. And you're right, the Pep coaching tree, if you define it as either people who played for him, like the Xavis and Xabi Alonso's and Vincent Kompany's, or those that coached under him, like Arteta, Maresca, it's unbelievable how many guys there are.
When you say this player has Manchester City on their CV, it pops now. And that brand recognition is relative to Pep. Now, I know that there was success before that, but really it went into hyperdrive, and really that magic sauce that is slathered all over everybody, whether it's even tangential or not, it's happened under Pep.
Even Ten Hag, he coached Bayern Munich at youth level while Pep was there coaching the senior team. So a lot of people think that they drank from the same fountain. And that's the last piece of the puzzle here where I was going to go, because we're waiting on Manchester United. Entering the FA Cup final, it was a foregone conclusion that Ten Hag was going to be gone at the end of the season. And yet, lo and behold, they beat City and win the FA Cup. And now there's this growing sentiment that they should keep him. Now they have new owners, Ineos, who took over in the middle of the season. So they said they're doing a major review of the club and they're going to decide in the next week or so. And so we're all waiting to see if United will be shopping for a new manager as well. But there's actually a possibility they might keep Ten Hag.
That's insane. That is insane. And look, congratulations, you won a trophy. But his comments before the game, I don't know if you read them. I'm talking about Ten Hag. His comments about how, everybody expects us to win every game. Everybody expects us to compete. And everybody expects us to be great. Yeah, that's the job. That's the gig that you signed up for. That's what Manchester United is about. That's the brand, and that's the legacy that everybody is trying to live up to. And it's not unfair given the players that you have, the talent that you have, the money that you spend. And if you don't want that type of pressure, then don't coach a super club. And am I saying that Manchester United is, at its zenith? No, I get that. But it's not unrealistic to expect Manchester United, even the 23-24 version of Manchester United, even with injuries, to do better than that. And it sounded so tone deaf. And you're gaslighting us, Ten Hag, by saying something like that. And at best, it's naive. And at worst, it's completely delusional. And for that reason, regardless of getting winning some silverware, you need to make a change, and you need to make a change now.
It is amazing how one game can swing the perception. They finished 8th in the Premier League, last in a Champions League group that included Copenhagen and Galatasaray. And if you had held a poll among United fans prior to the FA Cup final, I guarantee it would have been like 90-10 he should go. And now all of a sudden it seems like it's 50-50, all because of one game. One game in which, let's be honest, City had just won the Premier League, so they were a bit of a hangover from that. So, I mean, they're putting a lot of stock on that one.
Plus, it's the FA Cup. Who the hell cares? It's the FA Cup. That's what you're basing it all, is the FA Cup. Come on. Now, and they played well, but the whole point was, and I don't know if you saw the interview after the game where they were taking him to task, saying, yeah, maybe if this team had showed up every single game this season, we wouldn't be having these types of conversations, which is absolutely correct.
Now, I will say, the decision of whether to get rid of him, I think you can't divorce that from who you would bring in. So they have to think about who the options are and who the alternatives would be, and then make a decision. But, I've heard Tuchel, I've heard Pochettino. There are some big names out there.
Xavi's available.
Xavi's available, yeah. All right, so that's it on the European front. I mentioned this Saturday we have the UEFA Champions League final, and then later in the day, live on FS1, we have the CONCACAF Champions Cup final. Pachuca hosting the Columbus Crew at the Estadio Hidalgo. Columbus, who have already eliminated Tigres and Monterrey, looking to become the second MLS team to lift this trophy in the last 3 years. Can they finish the job in Mexico?
Well, considering what they have done to get to this point, they've already proven that they can go to Mexico and then they can get results, even when people don't think that they can. Now, is this a bridge too far? I don't think so. Yes, they are playing at altitude. Yes, they are again playing down in Mexico. They do not play midweek. Now, we again are recording this on Wednesday. There is a slate of MLS games to happen this week. They do not play midweek. They will be rested. Seems like Kucha's going to be back for this after a little bit of injury, so I think that they will be in full strength. But, and this is a big but, Mosse, because I was thinking about this on the drive in. Remember the sky is falling days not so long ago, a couple months ago, and oh my goodness, this is a barometer of what MLS is and what this isn't. And now we find ourselves right back in a situation where it's MLS versus Liga MX in the final for all the marbles and all the bragging rights, and using it, like I said, as as this message of what MLS is and what MLS isn't. And yet, this Columbus team has arrived at this moment playing with one foot behind their back by design and as a decision and as a function of the system that exists when it comes to MLS. And so there's a part of me that worries that if Columbus were to win this, I mean, I'd celebrate like anybody else, because of what it represents for American soccer, for what it represents for MLS, and this back and forth that we have. But it doesn't force the owners of MLS to actually do anything more. They become content. And so there's this part of me, a very, very small part of me, that says, for the greater good, is it better that Columbus gets their ass kicked? And I want to fight against that little piece of me. But I also want people to understand, and I think they do out there, that it's not a fair fight. And I want it to be a fair fight, because when it's a fair fight, I don't think it's actually going to be fair, because I think MLS is going to kick the crap out of Liga MX.
No, I get it. I mentioned Columbus looking to become the second MLS team in the last 3 years to win this competition, and I think their run would be much more impressive than Seattle's.
Really?
Taking out Tigres, Monterrey, and then winning a one-off final in Mexico against Pachuca. You compare that with Seattle, who beat an okay León team, then NYCFC in an all-MLS semifinal, and then a very average Pumas team, an abnormally weak Liga MX team to face in a CCL final, and they got to play the second leg at home. So I know Seattle fans listening right now are probably angry at me.
Yeah,
but
I don't want to parse it out. Like we can do that with World Cups. We can do that. Oh, it was an easier group, and it was easier this and that. I mean, either you're the champions of CONCACAF or you're not. And U.S. teams, MLS teams in the past have been champions of CONCACAF. So in that sense, it's nothing new, but this would certainly be something to applaud. But I don't know any more or less so than when it comes to Seattle or anybody else.
You know what's interesting? This is the 7th Liga MX versus MLS final in this iteration of the competition. I know people like Kobe Jones resent that cutoff that we do since the 2008-9 campaign. There was one other one-off game, which was Tigres LAFC in the bubble in Orlando during COVID. All the other previous ones were two-legged finals, and Liga MX won 4 of the 5. But MLS teams actually fared quite well in Mexico in the away legs of those finals. RSL got a draw against Monterrey in 2011. Montreal got a draw against America in 2015. Toronto beat Chivas in 2018. Seattle got a draw against Pumas in 22. The only loss was León against LAFC last year. So it's weird that in CCL finals in Mexico, MLS teams have actually gotten decent results. We'll see if that carries over in this scenario where it's not 2 legs, where it's a one-off final.
So this is the first year that it's been called a CONCACAF Champions Cup.
They've gone back to that. It used to be back in the day, yeah.
So Seattle's the only one to have won it as a CONCACAF Champions League.
Yes.
All right. Well, Columbus could possibly share it with the likes of the Los Angeles Galaxy and DC United then.
And 2 more thoughts on this. León handled this just fine last year. They had a similar predicament, but Pachuca will have had a weird layoff here because they were eliminated by America in the quarterfinals of the Liguilla, and so they haven't played a competitive match in 3 weeks before this final. Now, like I said, León had a big layoff last year. We all made a big deal about it, and they went out and won both legs against LAFC, no problem. We'll see how Pachuca handles it. It's not ideal to be going into a major final having not played a competitive match in 3 weeks.
Poor Pachuca.
However, another interesting subplot for me is, the way Columbus are going to play trying to play out of the back under Wilfried Nancy. And we've seen both sides of it in this campaign. You had that Patrick Schulte horror show in the second leg against Tigres, but then you had the second goal in the return leg against Monterrey that Rossi scored. That was this incredible team move from one end to the other. So it's going to be fascinating to see which side of the coin that falls on in the final, because you know that's how they're going to play, and it can either go horribly wrong or it can go very well.
Well, if in the final you betray who you are, I mean, that would irritate me. I scream and yell about it, and I talk about pragmatism, and I talk about some of the ridiculous risks that some of these teams take. But if you are a true believer, if you are a true romantic, then you do not betray your ethos at the most important game. And I don't think Wilfried Nancy will. I think he truly believes that this is not only the best way for his team to win, but it is the best way to play the game, even if at times it takes risks, and even if at times they are dinged because of those risks. But if Wilfried Nancy and the Columbus Crew lose this game because they tried to play out of the back and it got nicked in a really advantageous area and Pachuca scores and that's it, there's a part of me that's going to go, yeah, well, that was a dumb thing to do. But there's also that romantic part, and I do have a romantic part that says, yeah, but you know what? You died on that hill. And there is an honor to that I can at least appreciate and respect.
Yeah, great coaching matchup with Nancy and Almada. And then, as you mentioned, assuming Cucho starts, great South American center forward matchup with Cucho and Salomon Rondon. So we're excited for this final Saturday live on FS1. Lastly, for this segment, MLS. As you mentioned, we're taping this on Wednesday afternoon. There's a full slate of games tonight, including Inter Miami hosting Atlanta. Tata has already announced Messi and Suarez will play in this game. And then at the weekend, Inter Miami will host St. Louis. We'll see if they play in that one. But this is all occurring against the backdrop of the controversy from this past weekend. Miami was away to Vancouver. That's the longest trip that any MLS team can make, going from Miami to Vancouver. And so given that they had this midweek game coming up, and also that Vancouver plays on artificial turf, taking all the different factors into account, Tata decided to rest Messi, Suarez, and Busquets. None of them made the trip. This was only revealed 2 days before the game. Vancouver had jacked up the ticket prices and really promoted the fact that this was going to be a big occasion with Messi coming to town, massive crowd, and then he doesn't play. Fans are disappointed. Once they found out he wasn't going to be there, they tried to make things right by giving fans a 50% discount at the concession stands. And if you were under 18, you got your food and drinks for free. But that wasn't enough. The fans were still unhappy. There was a petition for them to get a refund. So now they're giving out credits, free tickets for upcoming games. But again, it's just highlighted this whole issue of trying to profit off Messi, but the dangers of doing that with a 36-year-old that's invariably going to sit out games.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know for some that this is old news and this has happened, but this is the first time that we're back together. And I do think it's an evergreen type of topic, and it will continue to be a topic because Messi is going to be sold everywhere, whether it's by his own team, whether it's by the league, or whether it's by other teams that he is playing, or whether he's playing international tournaments going forward. And you are derelict in your duty in terms of your business if you do not sell it. He is an incredible asset, incredible value, and he brings in people. People pay more money, more people pay more money, and there are more eyeballs in terms of bringing people into the tent. When it comes to what Vancouver did to try to ease the pain and the obvious pain, I don't fault them for trying to do that. I do think that it's a dangerous precedent. But for any team to recognize that there are going to be thousands of people that normally wouldn't be partaking your product, now partaking it specifically because of one player, and going and doing things to try to soften the blow, I think that that's good business. However, to the people that bought tickets, buyer beware. It is on you. It is not on anybody else. This is not a concert. You're not buying it to see Taylor Swift. All right? This is sports. And everybody understands that when they buy their tickets, even tickets that are marketed with the stars that every single sport and every single team and every single league do, there is the chance of injury, there is the chance of coaching decision, and in this case, flying across the country, because Tata Martino has a responsibility to win, because if he does not win, he will be fired, and he needs to do whatever is best for his team. Do I like it? No, because I would like to see Messi play every single game. But the reality is he gets to decide what's going to happen. And if you want to risk it and chance it, as a lot of people did, then you run the risk of not being able to see it ultimately. And not for nothing, but the players that did go from Miami, they beat you at home. So they didn't even need Messi and Suarez and company to be able to do that. And so they arrested them going forward. But it's not going to stop people from marketing and selling Messi, nor that it should. But just be careful when you buy those tickets, because whoever's on the ticket or whoever has been marketed, they're not guaranteed to play.
Now, we asked Sean Sullivan if he had spent hundreds of dollars on these tickets and then all he got was a 50% discount on the concessions, would that have been enough to make up for it? And he said absolutely. He would have gone to town on the beer and the food and would have been a happy camper. So there are folks like Sean Sullivan who appreciate what Vancouver tried to do.
Where does it stop? What if some dad buys a ticket because he really wants to see, I don't know, Ricky Puig, and Ricky Puig has a hair dyeing accident or something and it can't make the game, or say, am I going to have to give him free food and all that kind of stuff? I mean, give me a break.
It's funny you made the music analogy with Taylor Swift. I was thinking about this. Aaron Schechter and I recently went to see Springsteen at the Forum. We spent tons of money on the tickets. Imagine if we had shown up and all of a sudden, Springsteen and the E Street Band aren't here. It's a tribute band instead.
Right. Or the opening band only plays. I mean, no, they cancel the concert when the headliner can't show. But while he is the headliner in the sense that he is a star, this is sports. And you guys were in New York. In Broadway, if you read the tickets, it always says subject to appear, subject to change. And there are times where the understudy shows up, and you're just out of luck.
There's a Seinfeld episode where Elaine gets tickets for people to go see Rochelle, and Bette Midler's not starring in it. It's the understudy, and they were very upset.
It's the way it goes.
All right, so like I said, Inter Miami playing Atlanta tonight and then St. Louis at the weekend. Cincinnati, incidentally, have won 7 in a row as of this taping. They're only 1 point behind Inter Miami for the Supporters Shield lead. And then also on Sunday, live on Fox, Atlanta versus Charlotte. So we do have some MLS action coming.
Somebody asked me on the X Machine over there about Cincinnati and, are they being overshadowed by Inter Miami? And of course they are. And everybody is because of what Messi is. But Cincinnati can just go about their business and they can kind of lean into that small market, Rodney Dangerfield type of lack of respect that they are not getting, or it's being perceived that they're not getting. But this is a good team. Somebody also asked me about Pat Noonan relative to the national team. And, I don't think that he would be number one on my list if I was saying replacements for Greg Berhalter, if they were going to do something like that. But I would certainly sit down with him because he's had a really, really good run. He's obviously a good coach, and I think he has the potential to be a great coach, but it's still a very small sample size. But what he's doing right now is pretty incredible and wonderful for the city of Cincinnati.
That is the end of a beefy first segment.
That's all right. That's okay. We'll make it up on the other segments. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we got all sorts of U.S. men's national team and U.S. women's national team news. Don't worry. Okay, welcome back. We are in the season, my friend. U.S. men's national team, U.S. women's national team, U.S. Olympic team, men's and women's, all getting together. We got some expanded rosters here to go over. Where should we start?
While you were in Germany, the U.S. men's national team announced a 27-player roster for a training camp, friendlies against Colombia June 8th, Brazil June 12th. And then after those two games, Greg Berhalter will name a Copa America squad, which can be anywhere from 23 to 26 players. I had Doug McIntyre on the pod to talk about it. Doug also wrote a very good piece. Everybody should check out on foxsoccer.com about it. You have not had a chance to chime in yet. So overall thoughts on this roster?
Overall thoughts, I don't think that there are a lot of surprises. I know people are going to scream and yell about some different things, but they're like, are you really going to get bent out of shape about Shaq Moore? I mean, it doesn't matter to me. I'm not angry about anybody that is on here. I'm also not angry about anybody that's not on here. I think that this is more than a capable team of doing damage in this tournament. I'm much more interested and I guess concerned about what this team is going to be starting in this summer and then leading over to these next 2 years. And first off, you mentioned the friendlies. What is Greg Berhalter's posture going to be when it comes to how to approach Colombia and Brazil? Because again, the more elite competition this team plays, the better off it is relative to 2026. And not unfortunately, the reality is that these are two friendlies gearing up for a tournament, and the tournament has to be the priority, but you can't waste these two friendlies against two really, really good teams, even though you might see one or both of them when it comes to the tournament. So do you just run the horses and see what happens and play those two games and whatever happens and then continue on into the tournament? I don't know, but I don't want to waste any moment.
Interesting. So you wouldn't make mass subs in those games just to get a look at players.
No.
You want them to treat it as if it's a game the result matters and make strategic moves.
I would treat it as you have right now 5 games. Okay, if you have Colombia, Brazil, and then the 3 group games that you have, and I don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize going on in the tournament, because actually playing in a tournament and having that tournament mentality is important. But I don't want to chop and change, and I don't want to rotate. I will say this about this U.S. men's national team, and I think that this is a danger for this team. We have seen this team grow up. We have seen this team mature in front of us. We have labeled them at times, the greatest generation that we have seen in terms of talent and in terms of depth. I do think that there is a danger of looking at this group and letting them get away with not living up to expectations. I think that there is a danger of this group being complacent. I think that there is a danger of this group just expecting to play, expecting to be on the field, expecting to be called in. And I think that that's something that Greg Berhalter and his staff have to be very, very aware of, because I think individually and collectively this team has a much higher ceiling. And over the next 2 years, I hope that they hit that ceiling, but I worry that their growth is going to be stunted. And I know this is a longer conversation, a much longer discussion that I think we can have at some point, but this group from a very, very young age has been given everything. And our expectations have risen, but I think that they can do more. And I don't want them ever to rest on their laurels. And I don't think that they will, but I think that there is a danger of them doing it.
I'll ask you some of the questions I asked Doug. Serginho Dest, we know, out with an ACL injury.
Yeah.
Berhalter did a conference call with reporters the day that the roster was announced, and he ran through all the different options to replace him. He said it could either be a like-for-like with a Joe Scally or Shaq Moore, or Yunus Musa or Timmy Weah or Weston McKennie could all play there, perhaps a couple of the center backs. We know Stu Holden on this podcast advocated for the U.S. to play in a back 3 with Timmy Weah as a right wing back. There are 5 center backs on this roster, so in theory you have the personnel to do that. What say you about this whole replacing Serginho Dest?
If you're going to play in a back 3, then play in a back 3 until 26. Okay? I mean, the having the option to change into a back 3, no. I mean, it is fundamentally different the way that you play in a back 4 as a back 3, and we know a back 3 oftentimes is a back 5. So if you're going to change it, that's a massive change. And if you're going to do it, then do it now and live with it for the next couple of years in terms of a back 3. And if you're going to play in a back 4, the 2 you mentioned, I don't think that they're good enough. I do think that a possible experimentation with Weah over there is something that you can do, and I would like to see. I think Dest will be back, and it's a huge loss. But I mean, to his point and to Doug's point, they got to figure it out, and I don't know what he is ultimately going to do here.
They may not have 5 center backs for the Copa America, though. More on that in a minute. But the other thing I asked Doug about was Tyler Adams' fitness. He started only 1 Premier League game this season because of hamstring and back injuries. He did play some critical minutes in the Nations League Final Four, scored that goal against Mexico in the final. But I asked Doug, do you think Tyler Adams is capable of starting and going all 90 minutes in games this summer? And Doug said he wasn't sure. Could that be a potential concern for the U.S.?
I mean, the national team is not a charity and should not be treated as such. And so if you have a player that can't play 90 minutes, as important as Tyler Adams is, then why the hell is he on the team? And look, I know that there are long-term benefits, and it is a family, and if he continues to progress, he is going to be on the team. But it's Janet Jackson, what have you done for me lately? You need to be here now and help us. So that would be concerning. If I come to find out that Tyler Adams is only a 30-minute or 20-minute type of player, then no. I want somebody else in there, as good as he is, and as good as that 20 minutes may be. Because again, there are no sacred cows. Everybody should be under pressure, and some of that pressure has to be manufactured by Greg Berhalter and his staff. And I think it's vital that pressure is manufactured so that everybody understands that they are not being gifted opportunities either on the field or even just getting called into this team.
Very quickly, you quote her a lot. Are you a big fan of Janet Jackson's music?
It's Miss Jackson if you're nasty. Yeah, I think she's incredibly talented.
Because, we might try to get her on the pod.
Yeah, I mean, she's huge. I think she is I think she believes with, like Stu, that the team should play in a back three. So, we can fight about that.
All right, 2 more points. Gio Reyna, I asked Doug, is he a bang-on starter at this point, or it still depends on the opponent, the situation, the midfield configuration? Could you see a world this summer where Gio Reyna doesn't start a big game?
Yeah, if he comes in, he's got a bad attitude. I mean, haven't we heard about that before? So, I mean, I'm not being flip here. If Gio Reyna comes in and thinks his you-know-what doesn't stink, and that applies to anybody else on the team, and just saunters around and doesn't do what Greg Berhalter needs him to do, then no, he's not an automatic starter, but I think he's in a good place. I think that they have gotten over some of the problems that they have, but you want more Janet Jackson? I'll give you more Janet Jackson. He needs to be able to perform and show that he deserves to be on the field just like anybody else. And it's not just during that 90 minutes. It's obviously in this camp that they're having in these games that are coming up. So if he wants his place to be assured, he has the talent. He's certainly been given enough leash and opportunity, maybe more so than anybody out there. So it's up to him to prove that he deserves it.
An interesting moment on that conference call I alluded to, Berhalter was asked about naming 4 center forwards in the squad, and he corrected the reporter and said, in my view, it's only 3 because I consider Haji Wright more of a winger. So in Berhalter's mind, there are only 3 candidates for the center forward position on this roster, Sargent, Balogun, and Pepe. Do you buy that first off? And how would you rate the pecking order between those 3 that he called in?
I mean, I think that Balogun's the incumbent, and not because he necessarily deserves it. I just think that's how it's played out. And Josh Sargent, because of that injury, hasn't come in, and until he comes in and actually does something. But I'm excited about it. And Ricardo Pepi, I guess would be 3rd. So that would be the pecking order right now. If you're telling me right now that Haji Wright, according to Greg Berhalter, is now considered a winger, right?
Yeah, that's what he said.
All right. Well, I guess he's a winger then.
So we'll see. It's 27 now. After these 2 friendlies, they have to name a roster for the Copa America, which can be anywhere from 23 to 26. It'd be interesting to see if he takes the most players available and only cuts 1 from this team, or if he takes fewer than 26.
Why would you ever take fewer than 26?
That's what I think, but Didier Deschamps named only 25 for the Euros.
Dumbest thing in the world. I mean,
well, in fairness, France doesn't have a lot of good players. So.
Right. All right, yeah. Yeah, you're going to take 26. So, I mean, you should take 26 if they allow you to take 26. Thank you, COVID.
Well, one guy, by the way, let's go there next because, the 5 subs was supposed to be a temporary COVID deal, and now that's stuck. And it seems like the 26-player squads for major tournament, that's going to end up sticking too. Does that bother you? Do you think that's too many?
Doesn't bother me at all. I mean, I've told you before that it irritates me to go to a soccer game and that there are players on the team that because of the restrictions, and even now with the expanded restrictions, have no chance of actually getting on the field. I think everybody should have the opportunity to get on the field. So I'm good with, I'll dare I say it, as many subs as you want. All right. So everybody that you have on that roster, if you want to get them on the field at some point, fine, no problem.
Well, one coach that's going to have to cut a lot of players is the U.S. Olympic coach Mitrovic, because he named a training camp roster of 25 ahead of the Olympics. The U.S. Olympic team, they're going to play a friendly against Japan at Children's Mercy Park, and then he's going to have to name a final Olympic roster, which is only 18. And keep in mind, he's allowed 3 overage players. There's only 1 on this squad Walker Zimmerman. The expectation is there will be more, one or two more. And I mentioned that the U.S. right now has 5 center backs in their Copa America training camp roster, but it might not remain that way. There's a lot of Miles Robinson smoke. There's this feeling that center back is the weakest position from an under-23 perspective, so it's worth using multiple overage spots and having Walker and Miles Robinson start alongside each other at the Olympics. So we could end up seeing Miles Robinson dropping down from the senior squad to the Olympic squad. Nevertheless, very interesting Olympic training camp roster squad. You've got Schulte and Slonina as the goalkeepers, Jalen Neal at the back. No Diego Luna, which is interesting. You've got Aiden Morris, Jack McGlynn in the midfield, Busio and Tessman, who are right now trying to get Venezia promoted up to Serie A. You've got Paxton Aronson and Kevin Paredes, who we know play in the Bundesliga, Kate Cowell, who we know plays in Liga MX, Duncan Maguire. So a lot of names of note.
All right, so I know there are limitations and frustrating limitations when it comes to Olympics and the release of players and all that kind of stuff. But as I said before, I really don't care how the team does at the Olympics. I only care that there are players that emerge from the Olympics that can compete and challenge at the full national team. Nobody should be at the Olympics that is ending their career relative to the full national team. Even the overage players. And again, the conventional wisdom is you kind of go down the line and a lot of the spine types of players, goalkeepers, center backs, center midfielders, and or strikers when it comes to the 3 overage players that you pick. But, Walker Zimmerman, for example, if that ship has sailed relative to the full national team, then what the hell is he doing on the Olympic team? If Miles, who we know is still kind of coming back from that long injury, if you say, you know what, I think Miles is going to be there in 26, but he's not yet ready for the national team relative to Copa America, and so I'm going to use the Olympics to give him those games that he wouldn't get with the full national team, because ultimately I think he's going to be able to pass up others. I can buy that. I can understand something like that. But again, whatever those 18 players are, I want them to do things that open my eyes and that open Greg Berhalter's eyes. I don't want them finishing up their career, and I sure as hell don't want anybody on that Olympic team that doesn't have a chance of playing in 26 on the full national team.
One player who, to me, is so interesting in this whole equation is Ricardo Pepi. Now, when we interviewed Berhalter, I asked him about Pepi going to the Olympics, and Berhalter said it would depend on whether PSV would release him. Remember, that's Ernie Stewart.
Right.
Maybe they've already been told that they're not going to release him, but if he's available for the Olympics, to me, he makes a lot more sense on that roster. As much as Berhalter says that Haji Wright is a winger, we know he can play center forward. So with Sargent, Balogun, and Haji Wright, I think that position would be well covered on the senior team, and Pepi could go start games at the Olympics rather than being the third or fourth on the depth chart for the Copa America.
Who owns Pepi right now? Right? Who owns him?
No, he signed with PSV, right?
But PSV owns him outright, right?
Yeah.
So, but what I'm saying is that you would have to convince PSV that this is good for the asset that you have. Because if Pepi goes to the Olympics, scores a bunch of goals, and it blows up, his valuation just increases. So maybe you can convince Ernie Stewart that that's something that you want to do. But just there's every different team and every different league, they look at the Olympics in a very different way. Some teams, as we talked about before, take it much more seriously than others. I do think that Pepi can be in the mix, and this is an interesting type of thing. You know what? As I mentioned before, I wanted Greg Berhalter to coach both of these teams. Coach the team in the Olympics, because again, all I care about is the 2026 World Cup. And anything that is done between now and then, whether it's the Olympics, whether it's any of the youth teams right now, is with an eye to 2026. And I know that's not going to happen, but I had talked about that. So we'll see where Pepi ends up this summer, where he's released and where he ends up going, because I do think he's a different player than we have seen in the past.
Finally, we transition to the U.S. women. The Emma Hayes era has begun in earnest. She finished her season with Chelsea. She's traveled to the United States. Laken Lippman wrote a very good piece about Emma Hayes' arrival. Everybody should check that out. And she's already named a 23-player roster for her first 2 matches in charge, friendlies against South Korea. The first one of those games is in Denver, Colorado, which is where the U.S. is now, which gave Emma Hayes a chance to pal around with Coach Prime, Deion Sanders.
Prime, look at that. All right. Well, greatness meet greatness. and potential greatness in the future for both of those great coaches over there. And we're looking forward to the Emma era, if you will. And I'm excited about it. And she's got work to do. She has also an incredible opportunity to return this team to the mount. Plenty of talent, plenty of new talent coming in. There is a new sheriff in town. She does not suffer fools. And, this is kind of where it starts. Now, she's been working in the background. We understand that. But now she's front and center. She's doing all of the press out there and saying all the right things. And ultimately, they're going to blow a whistle. And we're going to see what this U.S. women's national team looks like under Emma Hayes. But I think there's a lot of fair and rightfully bullish types of feelings when it comes to what she can do.
And Twyla Kilgore is a part of her staff, so there is some continuity there. I mentioned the first of the two games against South Korea is in Denver, Colorado. The second one is at St. Paul, Minnesota. The 23-player roster, she named no Alyssa Nair. She's injured. You've got Naomi Girma anchoring the back line, Jenna Neiswanger in the midfield, Rose Lavelle, Lindsay Horan, Corbin Albert, young Lily Johannes, the 16-year-old from Ajax, and then the attack is bonkers. They've got Crystal Dunn listed as a forward, which is interesting. Forward, right? And then Macario, Alex Morgan, Sophia Smith, Trinity Rodman, Mal Swanson, Jaden Shaw. Mamma mia, what an attack, huh?
All right. We've seen it before, so, they let's see if this is look, what have you done for me lately? Last time we saw this team in a competitive environment.
Janet Jackson.
Last time we saw them, it was a massive and historic failure. So bring us back, Emma. What else?
That is it.
All right, let's take another quick break. We'll come back with a very quick Ask Alexi and finish up this show. Okay, welcome back. It's time for Ask Alexi, that part of the show where you send in your comments, questions, and concerns. Keep in mind that our handle out there on all the social media platforms is SOTU with Alexi, or you can call into our State of the Union podcast hotline, which is 657-549-2297, 657-549-2297. What do the folks want to know this show, Mosse?
First up, we have a voicemail. Let's take a listen right now.
This is Rick from Norwalk, California. You know where Ederson has the smiley face tattoo? Alexi, if it guaranteed the American men will win the 2026 World Cup, would you get England's flag tattooed there for the rest of your life?
Okay, that's an interesting question, Rick. But I have a firm and fast reply, and that is hell no. I love this game. I love the U.S. men's national team. I love what it represents on and off the field. I love what it has given me over the years. It would warm the cockles of my redheaded American heart, and I would break down in tears, I think, if and when I were to see the U.S. men's national team win a World Cup. But I don't want it and need it to the extent that I would want a tattoo, and especially a tattoo of the England flag on my face. So no, that is a firm no. I would not do it. I'm not judging whether it's Ederson or anybody else out there. I mean, the face tattoo is certainly one way to go. It's bold, but I prefer my tattoos in places that are a little bit more private and secure.
Ederson, by the way, will not be at the Copa America. He had to pull out of the Brazil squad with an injured eye, so it'll be either Alisson or the emerging Bento in goal for Brazil this summer. Next up, we have a question on X. Mr. Stuff and Thangs asks, Alexi, Lalas, how do you feel about a current U.S. men's national team player investing in a pro soccer club that's not part of MLS? What he's alluding to is Timmy Weah joining the ownership group of the USL's Brooklyn FC.
Mr. Stuff and Thangs, I love it. I love when people put their money into American soccer. And while I know I wear my MLS heart on my sleeve, and it is a huge and personal part of my history, and I want it to do well, I want American soccer to do well in all of its different forms and all of its different levels. And whether it's USL or whether it's NWSL or anybody else out there when it comes to leagues, indoor, outdoor, seven-a-side. I know over in Europe, PK is raising a bunch of money for a new tournament that he's doing. But when it comes to the domestic game and American soccer, which is my love and my concern, I love when somebody, in this case, Timmy Weah lends not only his money, but his fame and his face and the attention that can garner when it comes to Brooklyn FC. That's a great thing. The more people that want to invest in American soccer, the better it is for the growth of the game. And so congratulations and thank you to someone like Tim Weah. And, we've talked about in the past about, the Wrexham types of situations, stuff like that. Well, yeah, I think it is worth praise and extra praise and thanks when people, and in this case, Americans, bring it home and invest in our country and invest in the sport in our country. And so, yeah, I love it. And it doesn't bother me in the least. And competition is good. And I wish Brooklyn FC and I wish Timmy Weah all the best in terms of this this venture. And I know this is a long-term investment, and I hope that it pays off. And not just pays off in terms of money and being a smart, sound financial investment, but much more so in terms of the experience that he has, the people that he meets, and the impact that he makes now in terms of the fans and in terms of development and in terms of being at a place that he wants over there in Brooklyn. Congratulations and welcome, I guess.
That book I mentioned at the top of the pod, The New York Game, had a lot of stuff on the Brooklyn Dodgers. So any Brooklyn sports teams fascinate me. So I'll definitely be keeping tabs on this team. That is it for Ask Alexi. We now go to One for the Road.
Yeah, we'll finish this up quick. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, I just got back from Germany. It is a interesting country. I've been there many times over the years. Myself and the great Ari Hingst, who will be joining us this summer to broadcast, went over there. We did everything. We went to mountains, we went to castles, we went to beer halls. We saw how they make pretzels, how they make sausage, surfing, the Brandenburg Gate, the wall in Berlin. The list goes on and on and on, and you will see these incredible features because we have wonderful people behind the camera and wonderful people producing us. It was just a great way to see this country that is going to host this incredible tournament that we have the privilege of broadcasting this summer. And we've seen this over the years when it comes to our, whether it's Jenny Taff over there in Germany, whether it's myself and Stu over there in Qatar, whether it's Stu over there in Australia, and now myself and Ari over there in her country. And what was interesting to me, and I'll leave you with this, was Ari Hinks is a proud German and a proud Berliner, by the way. But the best compliment that she could have given us and our crew was we introduced, or at times reintroduced her to places in her country that she had never been or hadn't thought of or hadn't been in a long time. And it was wonderful to see her light up in terms of the information and in terms of the experience and the pride that she felt as she was reintroduced oftentimes to some of these places. And so I think that'll come across in these features when they show up this summer, and they will on a consistent basis, because we're a mere days away, Mosse, from the beginning of this incredible summer of soccer.
Our boss, Zach Kenworthy, just emailed me a preliminary rundown for the opening game,
Wow.
Germany-Scotland, so it is almost upon us. Yeah, on Germany, after watching that Bomb in the Cold War documentary on Netflix, I went down a whole Berlin Wall rabbit hole, read several books on it, so I'm fascinated by the Berlin Wall. I'm sure you.
It was incredible. That train that goes by, it was right there, and we actually had somebody who, at 14 years old, you'll see this incredible story. At 14 years old, he and his friends started their own printing of a newspaper that the Stasi ended up closing. He got arrested, and just listening to some of these stories. And while it seems like a long time ago, it's not that long ago. And for those that weren't around or don't remember, the fall of the wall and how it fundamentally not just changed Germany and changed Berlin, but changed the world and the way that we looked at it. Phenomenal part of history. So we'll tell that and so many other stories. So it's wonderful. Listen, I know we've gone long today, but we're back in the saddle, and we kind of had a lot to get out.
Can I just say it was great to do this with you again. We are almost whole. It's been quite the month at the State of the Union pod. We had Sean Sullivan go to Italy for his honeymoon. Kat went to Greece for her honeymoon. You went to Germany for work. Kyla went to Turks and Caicos on vacation. I went back to New York to visit family. Aaron Schechter went back to New York to eat a barbecue chicken pizza. So, I mean, they're all here. The only one we're missing is Jack. but it's kind of a dead time in Michigan sports, so I don't have much use for him anyway. But so we're almost whole again, which is great. Great to see everybody again.
Awesome. If you've listened this long, a reminder, YouTube. Subscribe on YouTube, all right? We're almost to the 20,000 mark, I think. So producer Sean told me to make sure that we mention that, and we appreciate everybody. Whether it's on YouTube or anybody else, we appreciate everybody downloading and subscribing and rating and doing all the different things that you do, watching, listening, doing all the things you do when it comes to the State of the Union. We will talk to you again next week. Enjoy your soccer, incredible things, and good luck to the Columbus Crew as they look to become champions of CONCACAF. We'll talk to you again next week. And until then, and as always, my friends, size the day. Auf Wiedersehen!